Hi, Emily. So, let's take a look at this essay. But before we do that, let's just take a look at your little note to me. Um, I don't want you to worry about an excess of words. It is a common belief by a lot of people that for IELTS, you should only write like 10% above the minimum word count. That's true for the Cambridge English exams. So if you're taking like the Cambridge Proficiency or the CAE, a lot of people assume that the same thing is true for IELTS, but it's not. In fact, the IELTS in general is a lot more lax in terms of word count. So what you really want to worry about with IELTS is making sure that your essay is well developed. It's a different kind of exam than the Cambridge English exams. So what they're really concerned about is that you show your development and you show a really well-developed essay and reasoned responses and arguments and so forth. Okay, so I don't want you to worry about staying under a certain word count. It's better to write far over. In fact, I know that some people actually ask for a second piece of paper, a second answer sheet, because that's how far, that's how much they write. So don't worry about that. What I want you to focus on is just writing a well-developed essay, okay? All right, let's see what you did here. So this is the food essay. Great. The issue of importing and exporting food has grown in importance since the advent of globalization over the past few years. Get rid of this A. While it is believed by some that there would be environmental and economic benefits if food were produced and traded locally, I will argue that it is just partly justifiable by giving examples of Iceland and Shanghai with explanations. Okay, very good. Okay. There is ample evidence that localization of food production is more environmentally friendly. The central reason behind this is that if food is produced and sold by local farmers, long-distance transportation for exporting food will less likely be required, thus considerably decreasing the amount of gas emissions. The main culprit of ever-worsening air contamination and our environment can be improved dramatically. For example, recent empirical research by Oxford University demonstrates that thanks to independent food supply in Iceland, this country boasts the cleanest air in the world. Therefore, it is conclusively clear that local food production helps a lot with our living environment, okay? On the other hand, our local supply system, however, cannot compete with food import and export in terms of finances. Imports and exports is what you wanted. That is because food... How about this? Wider food circulation mostly generates more opportunities for local farmers, plural, to produce a greater quantity and broader variety of what people want to consume to fulfill their growing demand globally these days, and this entails more profits than local food production without any doubt. All right, that's kind of long. Look where your sentence started. It started up here, kept going and going and going and going all the way down here. All right, so what happens is you think you're making a complex sentence, but really what you're just doing is making a complicated sentence. So try to shrink it a little bit. Let's try to split it somewhere, okay? Let's see if we can do it. That is because wider food circulation mostly generates more opportunities for local farmers to produce a greater quantity and variety of what people want to consume to fill their growing demand globally these days. Full stop. It's still kind of long. This entails more profits than local food production would or could without any doubt. For instance, Thailand saw a big rise in its GDP by 20%, brought by the increasing international food trading in recent years. In is missing here. Consequently, if the majority of food were circulated more, individuals and authorities would both benefit from it financially. In conclusion, food production localization is a good thing in relation to protection of environment, whereas the trade of eatables, usually, I don't know about this word eatables, I would change it, okay? Between different areas brings more upsides to people's life and our society. Okay, so is there one stronger than the other here? Is there one that you kind of are more in favor of? That's the kind of thing I would have liked here. I mean, you did a good job. You've made your position clear that yes for the environment, no for economy. but maybe it would have been nice if you had also just sort of said in general that this is more of a priority than the other is, okay? So perhaps that, yes, while it creates more income, etc., saving the environment is of paramount importance, so we should give more weight to that. So something like that. Just say where you kind of stand on it. All right, it's a good job. I liked it. It didn't feel too long. You've done a nice job. I like that you gave those little conclusive statements. It was nice. You did a really, really good job. Okay. It was full. It was developed. It was well controlled in all aspects. So now let's look at this. Okay. Now, whereas it's okay to write a lot for task 2, it's not so okay to write a lot for task 1. Let me tell you why. Because task 1, the purpose is to really make kind of informed edits and informed selections of the data. So you don't want to write every single piece of data. In fact, this particular chart has 24 pieces of data. You certainly don't want to write about every single one of them. So you have to select and choose, and it's really a task 1 where it's important to show good grouping. So let's see how you did with it. Looking at it, maybe it's your font that's just kind of big. It looks a little long, but let's take a look and see how you did. This bar chart compares sales of 2 chip makers, Intel and AMD, in France in 2017. Intel sales volume of chips in January stood at 50,000, closely followed by a steady increase to approximately 130,000 in June, peaking in that year. After that, in spite of a steepest dive that took place in July, with then being 1/3 of the previous month, the amount of Intel sales experienced a considerable rise to about 70,000. Okay, and eventually reached more than 100,000 at the end of that year. Okay, so let me see if I understand this right. For Intel, you've basically given me 4 pieces of data over the 12 months. You told me where it started, and that's great, because I think that's really important. And you told me where the peak was. And then you told me where the lowest point was. And then you said there's a rise to about 70,000 without telling me when this happened. So that was a little strange for me. You didn't tell me when that 70,000 happened. And then you said at the end of the year it was 100,000. Okay. With the exception of this, where I don't know what month you're talking about, it's fine. What I like is that you talked about the beginning of the year and the end of the year. For me, those are really important elements because it's like it's a story, and without them, it's like you don't know the beginning and end of the story. So I'm glad that you included them. I'm glad that you included the highest point and the lowest point. That's important. And again, I would have liked to know where this was. Okay, so it's fine. Your treatment of that is fine. In contrast, in January, the sales number of AMD was virtually half of that of Intel. Good. At approximately, careful with your words, approximately 25,000. And its highest amount of sales appeared in February. Careful. Exceeding Intel by around 120,000. It is noticeable that despite the following that although the following 3 months saw sales slumping dramatically, they climbed again to more than 100,000 in July before fluctuating from 90,000 to wrong word here, to nearly 5,000 for the rest of the year. Okay, I want you to do me a favor, Emily, if you can, when you're writing these task 1s, please try to include the image in your file. So this way I can refer to it and I can see the accuracy of what you're writing, as well as if you've included all the key pieces of information. I'm trying to kind of visualize this chart, and I'm having a little trouble. Okay, there's one piece of information that you didn't include here that I wish you had because it's really rather important. It's the fact that AMD had no sales in June. To me, that's a really important piece of information, okay? And I think it's also important to say that it had no sales, whereas Intel, that was its peak. So that's something that was missing for me here. There was some vagueness here, like, where was it? What does this mean, staggering nearly 5,000 for the rest of the year? So while you did a lot of things that were good, there were a couple of areas that were a little vague that I would have liked you to just explain a little more clearly, okay? So let's see what your overview says. It is evident that both companies experienced ups and downs in sales, and their peaks of sales emerged in different times of that year. All right, that's fine. Okay. So good job on the whole. I'm glad that you applied some of the things that I mentioned in my previous correction. So great work. Go ahead and correct these. Send them back corrected, error correction list, and new essays, okay? Get them done, and we'll meet back here to see your next set of writings. Good luck.